Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of On the Perf podcast, brought to you by Atlas Gunworks. Are you still using a plastic grip? That's silly. You should convert to an aluminum grip. Atlas Gunworks can get you set up with all your grip conversion needs and, of course, the magazines that go in them. Head over to atlasgunworks.com and get yourself sorted. Today, we're here once again with my cohort, Mr. Adam Reiser. Adam, how we doing?
We're doing all right. About to head down to the desert and do a little mountain biking. This is my first not shooting weekend in about 2 months, so kind of psyched. We'll change.
On your way to do some desert rat stuff?
Some desert rat stuff. Yep, get back to my roots,
Well, today we were thinking we're going to talk about how to seek out and prepare for a training class, a shooting training class. I personally facilitate a lot of training this time of year. I think Adam does as well, year-round. We're actually, for the first time ever, going to do one jointly, and we're going to do that on the fly, so that should be interesting for the people who are there. But we had it front of brain, and some pot has been stirred recently around this kind of stuff, so it seemed kind of timely to touch on the topic of how does one go about this seeking training endeavor. So,
well, before we get to that, Mr. Maxwell forgot to bring in the Gary of the Day, since it is a new segment.
That's right.
Seems pretty reasonable, but I'd say the Gary of the Day, since the class that we were teaching together is for the UTLE Not a Cop match, or rather the UTLE Cop match, and we are basically going to be teaching a bunch of cops how to shoot stages. So I would say a very appropriate Gary move is shooting a USPSA, PCSL, 3-gun, whatever action shooting type stage you want, like you're clearing a house, pieing the corners, checking your six, all that tactical stuff that does not and should not take place in action shooting sports.
And bonus points for pausing, turning around over your shoulder, saying, "I'm training for the real world," or something like that. Like needing to quantify it to everybody. Like, hey, I know I look stupid, but I'm really better than you.
Yeah. I'm only a 40% shooter because I'm doing this tactically. I would be winning if I wasn't doing it like this.
Yeah, I choose to be mediocre. Otherwise, I would whoop all your asses.
All right. It's taking a class.
My Jerry of the day would be, because I'm currently at the Texas 3-Gun Championship. This is not the Texas 3-Gun Championship episode, because I've only shot 40% of the match. But loud stage plan walkthrough talker guy on.
Ooh, like the talk to yourself guy?
Yeah. The louder one thinks out loud about their stage plan on a stage, the more likely that is to not be information that you want.
Dude, that's a good one. I have to say, quick flashback to the Dissident Shotgun match. That was the first time I'd shot tube gun in quite a while, and I forgot how annoying it was to be trying to do loading math while somebody is talking other loading math. You basically, in IPSC, you're trying to cram that stage walkthrough on the big field course into 5 minutes, and everybody is counting. If everybody just counted quietly, it'd be fine.
It's the quintessential, when you're trying to count and then your asshole friend is throwing out random numbers to try and throw you off.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's confused loud stage talker guy, because he's trying to figure this out and he's talking really loud. Everyone else on the stage is trying to count in their head or to themselves, and you're trying to ignore. It's the harder you try to ignore them, the more belligerent they get.
Yep.
And they don't mean to, but they just are.
Yeah,
so, loud out. Stage plan talker guy. It's like a Bud Light commercial, like Real Men of Genius.
Yeah.
Loud stage talker guy. But yeah, let's see. Preparing for a match. So in your mind, Adam,
for a class.
what are the steps to get ready for a class?
Well, I would say the first thing you need to look for is figuring out like what class you're going to take. So figuring out, there's two types of classes. There are classes that are going to teach you how to get better, and there are intertrainment classes. There is nothing that's ever going to happen in my life, barring the zombie apocalypse, which is going to require me to get together with a bunch of my boys and clear a house with rifles. Now, if the opportunity to take one of those classes came up, I'd probably take it because it would be a lot of fun. But in no way is that going to make me a better shooter. I think like that's Disneyland. That's going to be really fun. If you live in that world, yes, that's an important thing. That would be super helpful. As a competition shooter, that doesn't help me at all. So finding a class that's actually going to help you be a better shooter, I think is kind of the first step. And then having an understanding of what type of instructor you're looking for. I think a lot of instructors have enough social media now that you can watch little outtakes from a class or watch the instructor talk or whatever, that you should be able to get a pretty good handle on what type of instructor you're going to have going in. There are a very wide range of people who are very good at teaching. I would say your history of military service and or your placement at major matches has almost no bearing on how good you are as an instructor. I know A-class USPSA shooters who are phenomenal instructors, and I know national champions who are terrible. Like, teaching and shooting aren't the same thing, even if you're teaching shooting.
Yeah, and it's a pretty rare combination that someone who can do both like comes together in like a person, and that person is interested in doing that professionally.
Yep.
It's kind of the classic those who can do and those who can't teach kind of thing. Not, I mean, the extremes of that don't quite work out. But yeah, just because someone is a very accomplished, competitive shooter or, tactical professional doesn't necessarily mean that they can communicate with you how they do that or understand how to coach you into being better, because a lot of them are what we would call like subconscious competent, in that they're very good but they don't know how they do it.
Yeah.
It just kind of happens. And then some people who may not have actually got the wood and put plaques up on the board. They have studied it a lot. They understand it very well, but for whatever reason, they haven't executed. But they intellectually understand it. And to teach a concept, it's more important to intellectually understand it and be able to communicate it to somebody more so than it is that you've actually done the thing at a high level, although it helps. Usually when those two things come together in one person, that person becomes a very desirable individual to take classes from.
Yeah. I would say a reasonably high level of competence is important. I think there's a lot of especially back in the day, there were a lot of instructors that essentially had no bona fides whatsoever that, were very high dollar expensive instructors to go to. And I think it's pretty easy to just look up somebody's like match finishes or something like that. For sure, if you are a mid-level shooter, you want to be taking classes from an upper-level shooter. So, if you're a B-class shooter, you want to be taking classes from somebody A or better. I think there is a spot where I've seen GM shooters take classes from A and M shooters because they understand something at a level that the GM shooter just doesn't. And they're like, hey, I'm a GM, I'm very good, but I'm trying to break through the next level, and I understand intellectually that I'm missing some key components here, and I kind of don't necessarily know what they are. But this other guy might have those components, so I'm going to go take a class from him. I have seen that, and I have seen that work out quite well. Like Ron Avery, before he died, a lot of very, very, very high level talent came through, who would go on to be national champions, taking classes from Ron Avery. And, Ron was a super squad guy, but he was never a national champion. So there's, it's kind of that like Michael Jordan's basketball coach wasn't as good as Michael Jordan, but he still had a coach sort of thing. It's kind of like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I think especially when you get to guys at the higher level, they're looking for kind of nuanced things. So it's not necessarily like they don't take a class looking to like drink from the fire hose. Yep. They're kind of almost, because I've been in this spot before where it's like they're more like looking to cherry pick something like, yeah. I haven't thought about that way before.
Yeah, you're looking for that one little tidbit.
They're going to take that back and digest it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Would you say there's any what would you call it? Any red flags for an instructor? Like you see an instructor, whether it's online or you're actually in a class, is there any red flags where you're like, ooh, this might not be the guy?
If all of their forward facing bona fides, if they lean really heavy into their military service, like if all their marketing and all their who am I, what did I do, like what are we about, what do we teach, if they're leaning heavily into military service and nothing else, that's a red flag for me, because that really just means they're going to parrot to you what the government taught them, and that was dated material when it was taught to them, and it's out of date now. So guys who lean really heavy into that stuff, and it does sell. Like on the marketing side, like people want to train with Delta operators and former Navy SEALs and Green Berets and stuff like that. Like it's sexy to sell for training classes. But if that's all they really have to say, or have, that's all their experience, that's a red flag for me. That doesn't mean that guys in that realm, there aren't really good instructors that come out of that realm. I mean, look at guys like Frank Proctor.
Yeah.
Right. Frank Proctor, he was SF. He had a special forces career, but he augmented it with other stuff too. He explored and grew his knowledge base and his teaching base beyond what the government taught him. Where there are other guys who don't. A guy like Matt Martini. All right, Matt Martini, he would be a guy that he has like both sides of the fence. Like when he speaks, you should probably listen on the topic. He's not just a guy from a unit. He also organically outside of work, outside of the ammo that's provided to him, has worked on growing and developing himself. Whereas, I mean, you look at other guys, I don't even necessarily want to name them, but like, guys, that's all they do, and that's their persona, is they were SF, they were the unit, they were SEAL, and that's why people want to train with them. Those are guys who I wouldn't even necessarily not want to train with them, but I would understand that I would understand going in kind of what I'm getting.
Yeah, and if you look at who those guys train with, so I whenever somebody learns that I'm a competition shooter, they always ask me, there's like I could like pre-record answers to a set of questions that I'm almost certainly going to be asked. One of them is always like, oh, have you ever shot against anybody who was a SEAL or Delta or whatever? And, I'm like, oh yeah, yep. Like tons of times. And they're like, oh man, like how'd you do? I'm like, I eviscerated them. Like I absolutely slaughtered them. And they're like, wow, you beat a Navy SEAL in a shooting competition? I'm like, yeah, because all I do is shoot. They have to shoot, scuba, halo, drive cars, run comms, do overland navigation stuff. Like, you don't have to be an expert at any one of these things, but you have to be kind of good at all of them, right? Like, where are they good? Like, if any tier 1 or tier 2 guy shows up in a shooting competition, like, they're going to be pretty good. They'll probably be able to shoot reasonably well. But it's not what they specialize in. So when when like tier 1 elements go to take classes, they go to a person who only does that thing. So it's like if they're learning driving, famously a lot of them go to O'Neill Rally School and they learn how to drive cars from a rally driver because you understand a lot of how cars work. And shooting is the same thing. Like they'll go take classes from competition shooters all the time. So yeah, I think once they get out and they start augmenting with other stuff, or if they're in and they're augmenting with other stuff, all that's fine. But yeah, anybody who's just like, I was this guy back in the day, you should, that doesn't mean don't take the class. Just like know what you might be in for. I would say,
I would look with more attention. I would pay more attention to what the course is and what I was looking to get out of it.
Yeah, I would say
if I was going to take a CQB course, if I was going to take a room clearing course, I would absolutely want to take one from a guy from the unit or from what's the Navy call it?
DevGru.
DevGru or the command. They call it the command.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would want to take it from those guys. Those those high level tier 1 anti-terrorist guys. Those are the guys you want to learn CQB from. Yeah. They're the ones.
100%. So I think like the in-person thing that I've seen a couple times, not in classes that I've taken, but classes where I was like on the range while a class is going on. If your instructor doesn't demo what he just explained, like if he tells you to do a thing and then you do it, and then he tells you to do the next thing and then you do it, and he never demos anything, that is a huge red flag. Like your instructor should be able to execute the thing that he just told you to do in the class in front of everybody. And like when I'm teaching, I actually find it more stressful to demo something in a class than to shoot a stage in a match. Because in a match, I'm like, I'm trying to do well, and I'm trying to represent and all this other stuff. But in a class, I'm like, these 12 people just paid money for me to teach them stuff, and now I'm going to show them one of the things that I'm teaching them. They are expecting this to go well, so it's actually kind of a little bit stressful to like demo stuff in front of students, but. As an instructor, you should be demoing whatever you're telling them to do. Not just because you could show them that you could do it, but because they need a visual representation of what that actually looks like. Like you need to visually show them this is what it looks like, when you're actually doing it.
Yeah, but also understand, like I kind of pump the brakes on that too. You have to understand what the class is about too, like, because there are classes, there are guys who are hard on demo everything. Well, there are instructors that you go to where the name of their class should be Watch Me Train. Like,
yeah.
Okay. It's like, are we here to watch Bob Vogel shoot, or do we want to learn from Bob Vogel? All right.
Yeah.
So shooting the demos can go too far another direction, or another one that's picked on. Get your drink ready, riser. Steve Anderson doesn't bring a gun to class. Well, he brings guns, but he doesn't wear one. All right? Because his class isn't about shoot like me. His class is about, for example, the mental game, mental management,
sure,
a few other things. It's not necessarily the material he's teaching doesn't live at the gun, even though a gun is involved. And he'll straight up tell you in the beginning of the class, he's like, if I have a gun and I start shooting, he's like, I will forget you are here. Right? One more time. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of like that too. Like, it's like if when somebody wants to casually go shooting, they're like, or if I'm going to take my girlfriend shooting, right? I'm not really going to shoot. She's like, well, you shoot now. And I'm like, if I start shooting,
won't stop.
I will forget you were here. All right.
I definitely don't
I'll
have
start
that.
Training.
Yeah, I definitely don't have that. I'm pretty good about like, I'm going to show what this looks like. And I might show, a lot of times I'll actually like demo the wrong way to do something. I'll be like, hey, it should look like this. And I'll shoot the 6 rounds or whatever it is.
Harder.
And I'll be like, this is going to be a common thing. I want you guys to watch, and then I want somebody to tell me the difference, and then I'll demo the wrong way so people can see what's going on. Oh, I see stalkers in the background. I think I saw Vogel if I'm not mistaken. Maybe not. Yep. It was a weird reflection.
Yeah, he's here.
Word.
But yeah, well, and like I mean, a good example of this where you can go see it online too, like Ben Stager is very good at this. Like he can shoot at a high level and on demand do the thing incorrectly. Like it's probably harder to shoot incorrectly to show somebody something and not make it look like over exaggerated to the point where everyone's like, oh, I wouldn't do that. Like to accurately represent doing something erroneously is almost as challenging as doing it perfectly.
Yeah.
So yeah, shooting demos is definitely, I feel the same ways. It is very stressful.
Well, and I think one of the valuable things about shooting demos, and this doesn't necessarily always happen, but over the course of a class, especially if it's like a 2 or a 3 day class, like a lot of 3 day classes I've taught in the past have been like 3 day classes. As an instructor demoing skills, you are going to fuck up at some point. Like just like you're going to mess up in a match somewhere, you're going to mess up when you're demoing a skill. And I think it's super valuable for students in a class who might have a misconception about what it means to be a high level shooter, see somebody at a high level actually screw up right in front of them, be like, oh, yep, like just totally bomb that drill. Let me do it again so you guys can see what it should look like. Okay, that's what it should look like. Like that, I think is while not necessarily valuable for the class, I think it's valuable for students to see things not go well for the people that they're trying to emulate, and understand that like, hey, at every single level people make mistakes. The difference is how catastrophic those mistakes are. Like at a lower level, when you have a mistake, it's like a match melting mistake, and at a higher level, you bobble a reload, so you just grab another mag and you put it in the gun, but you still dropped a mag. Like it's understanding the difference between those two things, I think, is huge.
Yeah, you definitely, because they're there to learn, so you have to be able to do the thing that you're trying to teach. You need to be able to demonstrate to them how they would do it, and you need to do it in a way that they would understand. To also just like show them it's possible. Like when I think of this, if I were like think of the opposite, I think back to a welding class I had in college, and one of the last projects you had to do, it was an aluminum braze, and I was a good student, so I was way ahead of schedule, and when I was kind of surrounded by jerk-offs. And so I was like, I was trying to figure this out, and I didn't get a very good grade on it, but you got to do over until you got it right. And so I kept going over to the professor and be like, hey, man, what do you think of this? Nope, still sucks. Okay, well, how about now? Okay, and eventually I'm like, hey, like, and I kept pushing, trying to get information, like, how do I do this correctly? And this guy he's very old school and very truth is mine and I am above you kind of. He looked down his nose at people, and so eventually I pushed him far enough to the point where he wanted me to go away, and he said, "Hey man, it's an exercise in frustration." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "The temperature range between you getting that right and it being wrong is about 50 degrees. If you get it, it's dumb luck. It's impossible." I just put it in the class to be able to tear people down. Like, oh, well, screw you and the horse you rode in on. Like,
yeah,
right?
like, oh, sweet, I'm paying money to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, so I think a lot of newer instructors or people who are trying to come up in instructing, they go hard on this demo everything. It's because they want to shoot. All right, they want to be paid to shoot. All right, so it's not demo everything isn't about the instructor shooting and seeing the instructor shooting. It's the instructor needs to be able to articulate the skill and show how it's done and show the students that it's possible. And kind of you're leading them along. It's not a look at how good I am type thing when you're shooting.
Yeah, for sure.
Along those same lines, how do you feel about the adage of like using the same equipment that the students use?
I try to use similar equipment to the students. Like if I'm teaching, like for that LE class, I'm not going to bring a comped pistol, but I am going to bring, the non-comped double stack 1911 I've been shooting forever. So I'm going to bring something I'm comfortable with that's like reasonably appropriate. In this day and age, a lot of those dudes are shooting a 1911 platform. So that's pretty appropriate, but I'm not going to like dust off the Glock to bring it just for the sake of bringing it. I'm going to bring something I'm reasonably comfortable with. If I was a full-time instructor, yeah, I'd have like 4 or 5 different guns and, you know, bring the one most appropriate for the class, but I'm not. I do a handful of group classes a year and then, you know, like a dozen privates, give or take. So I'm a very long ways from being a full-time instructor these days. I used to be kind of close to that, but these days I got other priorities in life. So it's more like if somebody approaches me and they want some lessons, I'll come out. I do find it really funny. And this even happened when I was shooting a Glock, and I didn't understand, because everybody just assumes that whatever you're shooting is like super raced out and crazy. And so, you know, every once in a while you'll get the student that's like, oh, well, you can only do that because you're shooting that. And it's my favorite part of every class when it happens. And I'm like, okay, cool. Let me borrow your gun that I've literally never fired, and I'll shoot this drill. And it's, you know, it's going to be 0.3 of a second slower, but it's going to be the same. Or, you know, so I've had that happen, I don't know, quite a few times now, and it's always hilarious. But my favorite one was the last group class that I taught. We were doing kind of a like a throttle control sort of drill where we had like some wide open paper, and then we had this little tiny plate at like 15 yards, and then some more wide open paper, and you know, getting people used to changing aiming schemes in the middle of a stage, because we had, you know, a bunch of people in the class I noticed were either over aiming everything. Like essentially they would shoot the first target, and whatever aiming scheme they used on that target, they would just use for the entire stage. And so if it was a hard target, they would over aim everything and be like perfect cloverleaf alphas. And if it was an open target, they would, you know, would drop like 9 Charlies and not hit any of the steel. And so I was just doing like a little throttle change drill, and one of the guys kept missing the steel. And finally he's like, Adam, I think I need to go over the next bay and like re-zero this gun or something, like something's going on. And I'm like, all right, cool. Like, let me see it really quick. And I just like held it up, tink, hit the steel. And I was like, nope, your gun's fine. Like, and you know, and he had this just like, oh, son of, like, just super depressed, slightly angry look on his face. And I'm like, that's good news. Like, that means that we know that it's you and we can address it. So like, let's dig into this and figure out why you're missing that steel now that we know your equipment's not to blame. And we're able, you know, to like figure out that, you know, in that particular case, he was like pulling his trigger with his entire hand whenever it, you know, and I'm like, look at all your other targets. Like, all your other targets have left Charlies on them. Like, you're squeezing with all 4 fingers as you're pulling the trigger. That's rotating your gun. And, you know, as a result, was able to like articulate what he was doing. But I usually find that if people have that like, oh, well, he's shooting a race gun, so he can do the thing. Like, there's usually a moment in the class where you can kind of like squash that and just move on with life.
And to me, that's kind of the mark of a poor instructor too. Like, if they level that criticism at you, I almost feel like you have not taught the material very well. Like, I mean, I shoot an Atlas gun in all my pistol classes, and more often, I mean, no one else has an Atlas gun usually. Some of them probably have some kind of double stack 1911, but I've never shot a demo and had somebody say, "Oh, it's just because you had that fancy gun." It's like, okay, did people come away from the class feeling like they improved? Because if they feel like they improved, then they're not going to have questions about your gear. But if they're struggling to improve and they're starting to want, well, why can't I do the thing? That's when they're like, oh, well, maybe it's that fancy gun. So, like, the more people lean into, you got to use the same thing the students use, blah, 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 and don't want them to think it's just because the gear that I can do it. It's like, well, that, to me, that's kind of a sign of not being able to articulate the subject very well, which is the job.
Yeah, for sure. So once you have your class, it should be reasonably appropriate. Like, I'm not going to bring an open gun to an LE class, but I'm not going to necessarily change platforms entirely.
Right.
So I think one thing is understanding how to show up to the class. So this is particularly important if you're taking a multi-gun class or anything involving rifles. show up to the class with gear that's ready to go. Don't show up on day one of a class that you paid several $100s, if not more, to be at, and start the conversation with, oh, I need to go zero my rifle. Like, show up with a zeroed rifle, show up with a zeroed pistol, show up with, gear that's going to work, and show up with one of everything. I've had students in TPC classes back in the day that showed up with like 5 rifles, and they were using the class to try to figure out which one of their rifles they wanted to shoot for the season. And so every single time we would change drills, they would have a completely different rifle. And I'm like, man, you are hindering your growth here so much, because you're trying to relearn a different rifle while you're trying to learn all of these skills at the same time. And you're just, you're task stacking in a way that's very not useful. So have a pistol that's zeroed, have a rifle that's zeroed, and then have a shotgun, hopefully, that runs. And, if you already have your shotgun patterned, bonus points for that. And, some understanding of what all of this stuff is going to do, like on a very basic level. And, that all changes. Like, if this is you're taking a 3-gun class and you've never shot 3-gun, yeah, you're going to not have your shotgun pattern. You're going to have some issues with the rifle, whatever. But if you shot a few matches and you just kind of know what's up, show up to a class the way that you would show up to a match, essentially.
Yeah, and I would say also, like, if you don't have one, that's fine. But like, if you have a backup or a secondary thing that you're familiar with, bring that too. But yeah, like Riser's saying, like, this isn't play around in your toy box day. Like, the point of the class is really to work on you as a shooter, and kind of make the guns. Most classes that I can think of, they're about you using the stuff. They're not about the stuff and having the right stuff. So it is distracting. Like, if for some reason, just like at a match, if you have a rifle that for whatever reason is mechanically not functioning, it's going to be distracting for you, and it's also going to kind of derail the class. If you're struggling with equipment issues, so that's when it's time to, like, okay, this thing's not working, ditch it, grab something else, continue on. But you shouldn't be playing like musical guns, musical belts, musical pistols. Kind of decide for the day what you're going to use, and then use that. And it's just like it's just like school. Like, we're here to learn material. So show up with, the guns and all that stuff. They're just like notebooks, calculators, protractors, pens, pencils, all that stuff you used to bring to school. Like, these are the instruments of learning when you go to a training class.
Yeah. And I would say it is a good opportunity to try other stuff, but I would say that falls outside of the class time. Like, like when I was teaching at TPC, I had a JP rifle that was my class rifle that just existed for students to use when their rifles went down, or they didn't have a gun that was zeroed, or to shoot after the class or whatever. That rifle got somewhere in the neighborhood of 15,000 rounds on it before I started using it as a match rifle later on, and I put about 200 of those rounds on the rifle. So if Adam's there and he's shooting his Athena and you want to try one out, like, ask him to shoot it after the class, but don't change stuff in the middle of the class while you're trying to use skills or trying to, like, learn skills.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I would say, I think an important consideration too is understanding, depending on the class style and what you're trying to learn, especially if you've been shooting for a while and you have to unlearn things in order to learn them. I would love it if every student I got had never fired a gun before. I could make people better so much faster if everybody was just like a blank sheet of paper and I could just start from scratch. But like, unlearning stuff is super hard. And when you start task stacking, which is essentially what shooting a stage is, let's say you're learning how to do a draw, then you're learning how to do a reload, then you're learning how to do, grip and trigger control, which should actually come before the draw and the reload. But you're learning how to do all these different things. You can only consciously pay attention to one thing at a time. That's why, we memorize stage plans. So the stage is happening in the background, and we can consciously pay attention to whatever thing is happening on that stage that we actually have to pay attention to. So if you just learned how to re-grip your gun an hour ago, and now you're shooting Blake drills, chances are your grip is just going to default back to whatever grip you had at the beginning of the class. So it's pretty common for people to not get better in the class. And it sometimes happens when people actually get worse in the class. If they're like, I can usually shoot at this level. Now I'm trying to do all these other things that I normally don't have to think about, but I'm trying to think about them. I've seen a lot of people who actually they shoot worse in the class than they normally shoot because they're trying to do everything different than the way they normally do it. And so don't get frustrated if that happens. And if that does happen, it's potentially a good sign, because most of those people I have seen to go on to get drastically better a pretty short time after the class, because the thing that I feel like a class should really teach you is, as much as how to do these skills, is self-evaluation. Like the ability to leave that class, to shoot a practice session or shoot a dry fire session, and understand what you're doing right or wrong as you're doing it, and address it and get better, during that practice session. Like if you're expecting to go to a class, doesn't matter who's teaching it. If you expect to go to a class, shoot the class, not practice, and then go to your next match and do 10% better, you're going to be very disappointed. The real growth from a class is taking the material from that class and then applying it to practice after the fact. Now, there's exceptions to this, like, if we teach you how to break down a stage, you don't really need to practice how to do that when you're going to your practice sessions. You'll just have a process and you can apply that. Or if we're teaching you long range dope or something like that, that's more like a math equation type thing than what you do in the moment. Yeah, there's exceptions to this, but for the actual shooting skills, you're probably not going to get better in 6 hours. You might get worse.
Well, yeah, and the point of a class is to expose you to material. You're not going to master material unless you hire somebody on a recurring basis. If you're just taking a class from a instructor one time, you're going to get exposed to material that then the intent is that you would take that back to your training sessions and you would rep that out to grow on it. But so if we were going to teach you a draw, we would teach you the concept of a draw, and then the expectation would be, okay, well, you learned this, that, the other about a scoop draw. All right, now bring that to your dry fire and master it. You're not in the span of this 8-hour day going to master the scoop draw. We're going to show you a scoop draw, and then we're going to move on to the next thing, right? And then we're going to show you a reload. Then we're going to move on to the next thing. Then we're going to show you how to clear a double feed, and we're going to move on. You're not going to master any of these things. It's a flyby exposure of things to get both kind of a reference point as to where you're at, and then kind of show you how you could grow, and then it's on you to grow. But the class is really just to show you what to practice, and that's why another thing is it's a good thing to take notes also.
Yeah,
on an ongoing
100%.
basis, kind of things that you've covered, points of interest, new things that grabbed your attention that you really want to dig into more, stuff that you want to grow, stuff that you struggled with. But as you go, and write it down, all right? Because writing something down is 3 imprints to your memory. When I was in high school, middle school, college, I hated note taking because I felt like I never really went back and reviewed them. When I went back and read them, they weren't helpful. I felt like I either had it or I didn't. And kind of later in life, I had to be re-exposed to note taking. It's no, if you go through the process of writing it down, same thing. I'll be giving a presentation now professionally, and people will whip out their phone and take a picture of my slide. And it's okay, well, that's kind of great, but that's not that's not really going to help that person, because they didn't have to essentially earn the imprint on their brain. It's just in their phone there somewhere. Whereas if you go through the process of trying to digest the information, record what you're learning, record stuff you want to revisit later, because if you just go along for the ride in a class and you don't really take anything down, you might get to the end of the day and be like, "Wow, that was awesome. What did we do?"
Yep.
like when you call your significant other, okay, how was your day? Oh, it was great. We had this great shooting class. What'd you do?
We shot.
Did some shooting. Yeah, right.
Yeah, did some shooting. It's cool.
If this is material you paid potentially a few $100s, several $100s to ingest, like your good job as a student is to actively try to retain and engage with that material, not just go along for the ride. Unless it's an entertainment class, then by all means go along for the ride.
Yeah. I've never actually done an entertainment class. I kind of want to. I kind of think it'd be fun. Note taking is super good, especially when you get into like really detailed stuff where there's like, hey, this is the process that I use to break down a stage. Like I literally have steps. And so if you can just write those down, you learn a lot. Like any kind of like long range ballistic stuff, that's super valuable. I have a ongoing thing. I don't like journal my practice sessions, but what I do is I write down any breakthroughs that I have where I'm like, oh, if I just, do it like this. Like when I was relearning how to quad load a shotgun, I had a whole page of like little things where it's like, I'm not just going to look at the lifter. I'm going to look at the farthest open part of that cutout in the bottom of the lifter, because if I focus on that part, the way the shells sit in my hand, they're going to glide in the easiest if I focus on that part, and I consider that to be, like my entry point. So I was making super detailed little notes like that. If you have any breakthroughs in a class, man, just like stop what you're doing. If you have a notepad or a phone or whatever you're doing, I prefer like an actual physical notepad, but write that stuff down. Also, it depends on the instructor. Some instructors don't like you to film them. I don't know why. But yeah, if an instructor doesn't mind you filming them and you want to film a segment of the class that you're particularly interested in, or all of it for that matter, like by all means film that so you can, like review all the information later. But I would caution people. I would do like the turn the phone on and hang it at the side and like listen to the words sort of a thing. Don't pay attention to your phone that's paying attention to the instructor. Pay attention to the instructor. Like the recording of the class, if you're going to record some segments of that, should be a backup in case you want to go back and review information, but you should be trying to gather that information in real time, because if you're not, then there's no point in you being there. Like you might as well just watch a video of a class on YouTube and, count yourself as having taken the class. But, and I think, the difference between watching a class on YouTube and taking a class is huge. And I think the reason is the feedback that the instructor can give to you in real time. It's very often, and I'll even do it like shooting with Zach. So like, Amax and I shot the team match up in Parma with Zach last year. He was a student in a 3-gun class that I did like 3 or 4 years ago now. And now he is a super high level open shooter. I think he got his G card, or he's like a point away or something. Usually wins our local matches. And so I've gotten to the point now where I'm still helping him out, because there are things that I can see him do that he can't see him doing, even though he is a inarguably better pistol shooter than I am at this point. Like if we shoot a match together and both shoot in the same division, I'm going to have to really not mess up to beat him. And I'm probably going to have him make a mistake to beat him. Now, if we're shooting a 3-gun match, which is, my specialty, like, yeah, I'm going to win because that's my specialty. So everybody's good at their own individual things, but it's now gotten to the point where when we're practicing together, I'll have him watch me, even if it's not something that he is an expert at. Even if I'm shooting a rifle where I'm probably going to be a better shooter than him, I'll have him watch me in the off chance that, he can see something that I'm doing that I don't notice that I'm doing, right? Like the value in having a person who knows what they're doing, watching you with the intention of picking out things that you might not be seeing is huge. Like that is half of the value of the class in my mind.
Yeah, the point is to digest and interact with the material. Like, I think the reason a lot of instructors don't want you to film their classes because that's how they make their living, all right? So they want the intellectual property of their material to be something that you have to take the class for. But at the same time, I mean, look at Ben Stager. He'll throw up like complete dumps of classes on YouTube. You can watch most of it, online, but that's not the same thing as taking the class, all right? You don't interact with, even though he's saying the same things and you're still hearing him say the same things, like you're not interacting with it the same way as you would in the class. And the same thing like with note taking or whatnot, like Adam's talking about not taking notes from a training session, right? Well, like I'm the opposite. I do actually take notes on training sessions, and I stopped for a while, and then I started again because even though a lot of times I'm writing the same things and it doesn't seem like I have a breakthrough or whatnot, it does kind of just the act of doing it forces me to digest the 30 minutes I just spent on training. It's like, so my rule to myself is I have to fill a page. All right, well, okay, and that really like helps you revisit. Okay, well, how was that hand position? Oh yeah, I did kind of notice this that time, and blah blah blah. Whereas it happened, you realized it, you moved on with your session, and then you came back to it. Oh yeah, that thing. You revisit it, maybe think about it a little bit more. All right, you're intellectually digesting the material, and that should be the emphasis of taking a class and even evolving in your training. So that's really the point of the whole thing.
Yep. Would you say, so there's basically two types of classes. There's essentially group classes and private classes. I mean, we could break it down a little bit more than that, but let's say just for the sake of math, you're doing a 2-day class. It costs $450 and there are 15 students in the class. Is there more or less value doing a private class that costs $100 an hour that is going to be, half a day or less and costs, give or take the same amount of money? Like where do you think the value lies if you're trying to get the most bang for your buck?
I think it depends where you're at in your journey and where you're at in trying to master a certain set of material, so like I don't think I would at my level get much growth out of a group class the same way that I would have 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I was just at a different place. So if you're kind of the more basic and ground level you are, the more it's like, yeah, this is probably something we can learn together, or you're going to get an intellectual interaction watching other people digest this material too. Whereas if you're head and shoulders above, everybody else. So like if, a Delta operator goes and takes an intro to CQB class, okay, that they've already mastered this at such a high level that they're not really going to be engaged with the material as much. But if this is the first time you've ever interacted with the concept of CQB, all right, the first time I took any kind of CQB training or exposed to any of that material, like it was just like, oh, wow, it was a whole new thing, and I was getting just as much of watching other people do it, and taking the time while other people were getting reps, I was digesting my reps. Whereas if you have private instruction, you have undivided attention of the instructor, so it's a lot more customized, whereas like a group class tends to be a set, it's a set of drills and it progresses, or topics and it progresses. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Whereas individual stuff is kind of, it's very dependent on you and what you want out of it, and what, if you want to take a hard right and go and explore this, hey, you're paying by the hour. You can absolutely do that. So it's a different kind of thing. Or personality types. Like some people just don't like to do stuff individually. Like they want to be in a herd, and some people don't want to be in a group. They want what they want, and they want it very specifically. Well, that's probably more of a private instruction kind of scenario.
Yeah. Yeah, I think with the group classes, and I, for the most part, I very much agree that I would say like the more advanced you get in the sport, the less value you get out of a group class relative to a beginner class private class, because there's going to be things that are in that class that you just don't need. Like if there is a how to break down a stage thing for a GM shooter, like you already know how to break down a stage. Like that's not the problem. You need very specific skills or, polishing of skills at that point. I think the thing that a private class really gives over a group class, and they are way more expensive. Generally speaking, private classes are going to be way, way, way more money per hour. But, it's hard. Like if you do 16 hours of class, you do a 2-day, 8-hour-a-day class, but half of that is just stuff that you don't need, or maybe you're a super beginner and it's stuff that's over your head and like you're not even capable of digesting yet. If half of that time is just wasted, not only are you not getting any value for that time, but you could be spending that time doing something else. So
yeah.
So I think especially for higher level shooters, I think a private class is more valuable. I think the one thing as an instructor that a private class allows me to do is change direction in the middle of a class when I see what a student really needs. When you go into a class and you're like, a student will come to me and be like, hey, I want to work on this, this, and this. I'm like, cool. And I'll set up a class and we'll start working on that. And, if you're a good enough instructor, you'll be able to recognize like, oh, they think they want to work on this, but what they actually need is this other thing. Like they think they want to work on shooting on the move, but it turns out that recoil control is actually a huge issue. And until we fix that, shooting on the move isn't going to be a thing because who knows where that second round's going to go. So being able to, change directions in the middle of a class and make sure that student gets the most value out of it is a huge deal. Where in a big group class, sometimes you'll have a person or a couple people who are either way more advanced or way less prepared than the rest of the class. And I always feel bad in those circumstances because I'm like, man, like the less prepared person is going to kind of get left behind a little bit at some point. It might not be for the whole class, but there will be segments where they're like, I don't know what's going on at all. And the really advanced person, there's going to be segments where they're like, crap, dude, I don't need to work on reloads. Like I got my reloads down. This 45-minute block is completely wasted on me. So I think it's more for the higher end people. Like if you're a beginner shooter, there's going to be information that seeps into you, even if it's a little bit over your head. You might later down 2 months later, after you've mastered some other stuff, then you're thinking about stage breakdown, and then you're like, oh, I remember when, my instructor said X, Y, and Z, and then you can apply it. But for a really high level shooter going into a big group class with, unless everybody in the class is a pretty high level shooter, there's going to be parts of that are just kind of wasted on you.
Yeah, like I was kind of a high level shooter when I even got the ability to take some classes, and at that point I'm almost more a student of how does this instructor teach this material? Yeah. It's like if I take a handgun class today or going forward, I'm not interested in bettering my handgun skills. It's more like, how does Frank Proctor teach this? How does Steve Fisher teach this? How does GBRS group teach this? Like they all have their own they have their own spin on it, and some of it's good and some of it's like, some of it's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, that's a way. I'm not going to do that. And others like, oh, that's an interesting idea, blah, blah, blah. So a lot of times, like at the high level, it's more, I think I'm more interested in digesting how people teach the class and evolve. So there's always something you can get out of it. But like at a a lot of times my experience in the class, they're like, the instructor's circling around to me and like, okay, so like, are you getting anything out of this? Like, is this good for you? And it's like, oh yeah, man, you're good. But like, yeah, no, you're not going to get like any, they're not going to show me a different way to put my thumbs and it's going to change my life. It's going to be something really small. But everybody does go about teaching kind of similar things in different ways. And there's many different ways to go at it. And I think that's also kind of the mark of a good instructor, in that they may have a way to teach something. I think every instructor has a way to teach whatever they're teaching. The really good ones, the really great ones, have 3 or 4 ways they can go at it. So like if you're, a student is
and they
not
can recognize
connecting,
when it's not sticking. Yeah.
Yeah. So like if an instructor recognizes that the student is just not picking up what they're putting down, like, okay, let's try option B. Oh, still not working. Okay, how about option C? And like however many different ways they can, because it's to communicate a message, it has to be the right message in the right way when the person is ready to receive it. All 3 of those things have to be in place, and if one of those is off, it's just going to bounce off their forehead, and they're not going to retain it. So being able to go a few different approaches at teaching any given topic, that's really the mark of a good instructor, I think.
Yeah, 100%. And I would say if you are a higher level shooter and you're in a class with a bunch of people who aren't necessarily on your level, like, don't check out when they're covering the basic stuff, because there might be something in there that actually is super valuable to you. It's pretty rare, but it does happen. And like,
that's
I remember,
where I find it.
So when I was, and what I always come back to is like, there's kind of no such thing as advanced shooting. There's just more and more consistent application of fundamentals at a higher speed. Like I don't pull the trigger any differently if I'm, doing some super cool thing. Like, the ability to pull the trigger exactly the same time, all the time, no matter what, is the advanced thing. It's like doing the basic thing perfectly all the time is the advanced thing. So when I was teaching down at TBC back in the glory days, when it was, still taking place in St. George, and, we had this big instructor roster and did these crazy huge classes, I was already teaching 3-gun classes there. I already had major match wins under my belt. I was already a very accomplished 3-gun shooter. And I recognized that the pistol was my weak point. Like, I was pretty good at the rifle and a shotgun. The in-your-face hosey pistol stuff I was good at, but I wasn't good at throttle control. I wasn't good at difficult shots, and those like hard as hell matches, like 35-yard plate racks and stuff like that. I'd kind of get eaten up. And so I recognized that there was a weak point in my game. And I took a 3-day pistol class from Ron Avery, and it was a pistol fundamentals. And I would say the best shooter in there who wasn't me was maybe a B-class USPSA shooter. It was a very basic class. There was no movement. There was it was 3 days of just standing there learning how to shoot a pistol better. And afterwards, we had, kind of like a little bit of a class debrief, like, hey, what did everybody think? Do you have any questions? That kind of stuff. And somebody in the class was like, oh, like the whole time I just kind of felt bad for Adam because, this stuff was like so basic. I don't think he got anything out of it. And I'm like, no, like that was the most valuable stuff to me, because I, through, getting too fast too early, essentially, was able to do things incorrectly fast enough to still win. But then when I switched from, limited to TAC, part of the conversation we've had a million times on here, that there wasn't a whole lot of competition in limited. So I was like winning in limited, thinking I was good. And then I switched to TAC, where it was like super deep heat. I was like, oh, there is a fundamental thing that I am missing that I have been able to hide because I've been in a talent pool that doesn't have enough heat to bring that problem out yet. So yeah, as a person in a jersey with a bunch of logos, and an instructor, I went and took like the beginner pistol class, and it was the biggest step forward in performance that I had had in like several seasons at that point, of like, this is how you just stand here and shoot a pistol really, really well.
Yeah, I think the other thing too is like when people talk about how there's no advance and it's just application of the same fundamentals. That's true to a point, but that doesn't mean if you slow down and get your hits long enough, you'll get faster. Like
yes, yes.
Like I say, it's you have to continue to evolve and think about it in a new way. So like if you were to look at something like doubles, all right? If you look at a drill like doubles, everybody at every level is getting something out of that if they're really applying themselves to it, but they're getting different things. I mean, there's probably 3 or 4 or 5 different levels of processing and information that's going on there, and you kind of have to, but they happen in succession, so you kind of have to wrap your arms around the first thing before you can see the second thing, before you see the third thing. So that's not an excuse to just like say slow down and get your hits indefinitely, because that won't. You still have to push, but yeah, at the same time, it's not, there's no magic. The magic is there is no magic, but
yeah,
what actually happens is well, like we've talked about a lot, it's a visual thing. Like your visual processing and hand-eye coordination is what evolves more so than any given technique on where you put your hands or how tight you squeeze. It's the perfect mixture of all of it coming together is what progresses you to higher levels, and that's the journey that you're on, right?
Yeah, I would say. Yeah, when I've tried to explain to people in the past like the difference between beginner, intermediate, and advanced shooters, and I would say, like in my mind, like beginner shooters are trying to save whole seconds, intermediate shooters are trying to save tenths of seconds, and advanced shooters are trying to save hundreds of seconds, and you're trying to do those by doing the same thing, just a little bit cleaner, a little bit smoother. Whether it's shooting on the move or position entry or, shooting a predictive second shot that you're then, calling the shot as it's happening instead of waiting for the dot to come back, or, a stage plan that allows you to shoot a more aggressive thing that has a higher risk reward balance. Like whatever it is, you're still doing the basic thing, just more and more and more aggressively.
Yep. I think another thing too when you take a class is to let the instructor speak. Like you're there to take in their material, let them present it. If you really want to hit the ball back and forth with them, get a private session. But like a very famous tactical instructor, the late great James Yeager. All right, if you took a tactical response class, he was a big personality. Big opinions, very loud. He was an experience. All right. But he also made a point of taking other people's training classes. He had a big binder full of all the places he'd gone and a resume of training he'd taken. And other instructors, when they would talk about James, is like, no, he's a very good student. Because when he was in someone else's school, he was there to take in their material, all right? And so there's all kinds of stuff. He's like, well, no, there's no way we're teaching that at tactical response, but we're not at tactical response right now. I want to experience your material, all right? So that's kind of a thing too, is if you're going to take a class, you're not there to match wits with the instructor. You're there to experience and take in their presentation of the material that they put together to present to you. So let them do it. That's another big thing, because there's some people that just turn into big ask holes with a K. All right, if you have a question, ask it. But like, there's some dudes that just want to dominate the conversation or match wits with the instructor, like on an insecurity level. Yeah. That's not what anybody's there for. All right, you're there to take in their presentation.
Yeah, along those same lines, just like in general, checking your ego at the door is super valuable. I remember one time teaching a class where Jay Leese and Justine Williams were students, and this was I don't know, probably like 6-7 years ago now, something like that. So they're, they're like 15 or something at the time, maybe even younger. And I mean, they were just like way better than everybody else in the class, like just across the board. I mean, they were already shooting at a pretty high level. They were training constantly, and there were some people in that class that had a really hard time flying out from the East Coast and taking this class. And there was a couple of 4'10" girls that were just wiping the floor with everybody. And it really had a very negative impact on these people's experience, the class, and their ability to learn information, because they were so focused on, I'm getting beat by these little girls, that they sort of stopped paying attention to the class. Like they just like at some point were just like so wrapped up that these girls were kicking their ass that they kind of stopped absorbing information. And I was like, trying to bring them back. And I'm like, hey man, like, I understand, like, you're like, this is rough, but like, dude, they're on the range every day. Like they train all the time. Like I understand they have less years on this earth and they're a third of your size, but they are an example of what can happen when you put in like that level of work. So it's like, if you think you're hot shit and you show up to a class and this is, yes, you're training for competitive shooting if this is the type of class that you're taking. And there might be some little competitions in the class. Like that's something that I've done in classes in the past. Like I'll have some little competition and kind of like put a little pressure on and just sort of see how people react. But the point of the class isn't to compete against the other students. The point of the class is to learn information, learn about yourself, and to get better. So learning how to unplug that competitive thing that makes you a action shooter in the first place is super, super valuable when it comes to this, because there's some people that they're kind of immune to classes if they're not the best shooter in the class.
Well, yeah, and like if you had a gap in your knowledge base or your skill base enough to want to take a class, you shouldn't expect to be good at it. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, especially when a lot of the examples that come to mind are all ladies that I've taught. But like you go and you bring them out there and they're like, well, I'm not good at this. And it's like, well, you've never done this before. Why would you expect to be good at it?
Yep.
They're like, well, I'm not as good as you. I can't shoot a match because I'm not as good as you. It's like, well, I've been doing it for 15 years. Why would you expect to be as good at it as me? You've never done this before, So if you're going to a class where you have lots of material to learn, like, you shouldn't really expect to be a master of any of it. And if you are kind of going in there expecting to crush a class, well then why
are you there in the first place? Yeah.
Why? What are you doing?
Take that same amount of money and go to another match.
Yeah, go train. Go take another match. Go, I don't know. Go for a bicycle ride. I don't know what you want to do, but like, yeah, it shouldn't be an affirmation of your mastery. A class should be challenging you and should be presenting you with new things or presenting things in a different way to challenge your understanding of them so that you can grow.
Yep, 100%. All right. Well, I have a hard out here in a couple minutes, and Mr. Maxwell is, as far as I can tell, sitting outside his Airbnb in Texas, still wearing the jersey. I think I called him up while he was walking in, and so we both have stuff to do. So we're going to wrap this up. I'm positive that the next episode will be a recap on Texas 3-gun, where Mr. Maxwell is at right now.
Yeah,
do you have
hopefully I'll have a picture of a big buckle that I can show you.
That's right. Yeah, he's going to be rocking that thing. And we'll talk about the benefits and disadvantages of a 6-arc over 223. Maybe. We'll see.
Maybe if you're good.
Well, yeah, exactly. Anyways, so me and Max are teaching a class together here next week. We'll probably talk about that at some point as just an entertainment thing. I do essentially, if people reach out to me, I teach a class. I don't really schedule a whole lot ahead of time anymore because I have enough people that reach out that that's just kind of the way I go about it. So if you guys would like a class, just hit me up on social media and I can point you in the right direction. I have a page on my website that has breakdown of pricing and everything else. Mr. Maxwell teaches a metric shit ton through Vortex. Do you do any outside of Vortex private teaching stuff, Amax?
I do some. Most of what I do is through Vortex, specifically in the law enforcement sector. That material generally we present for free. So if you're out there, if you're in an agency, get at me. We can talk about what that looks like. But it's usually in support of product or product-related topics. But yeah, I do some private instruction as well. Some people have reached out to me recently wanting to do that, and I would entertain that if that's something you want to do. Get a hold of me and we can talk about that offline. But yeah, the door is definitely open for it.
Cool. Well, yeah, we got to get going. You want to sign us out there, Maxwell?
Y'all just go ahead and keep those overlay cards handy. This has been On the Perf, and we'll get at you next time.
See ya.